Hello again and welcome to another 140k Imperial Guard Tactics video, and today guys we are going to doing a first impression, some first initial thoughts on how to counter, how to play into the new and upcoming Tau Codex, because you're gonna have to face it guys, it's looking very strong. The word on the grapevine is, on the old internet, round the water cooler, down the watering hole, is that Tau are going to be strong. They've got bodyguards for Farsight, who's a tank. They've got bodyguard crisis suits and all sorts of crazy things. They've got firepower coming out of the wazoo. Basically, guys, as I've been saying for a while now, we back in 7th edition, lads. And 7th edition was when the Tau reigned supreme. In fact, they were so powerful in 7th edition that really they paid for it all through 8th and most of 9th. I mean, that's the they were pretty bad through 8th and 9th. Apart from, you had like Riptide with a billion shield drones. They had one or two builds, is what I'm saying. But a bit like Guard, they eventually got taken round the back of the shed like Old Yeller. But the point is that they're back now with a vengeance, and they're looking to reclaim some 7th edition style glory. That's what they're there for. And so, as Guard players, despite the fact that we have taken body blow after body blow, despite the fact that statistically, as of this weekend, we are once again claiming our rightful spot as the bottom faction, back in the mud, back in the trenches where we bloody belong. And that's where we are, lowest win rate of any single faction, not including all the different random Space Marine chapters. That's where we'd like to be, boys. That's where we are comfortable with being, down in the muddy shit. That's where the Guard belong, and that we're gonna have a good old fucking wallow in that bottom bit. But anyway, let's not get stuck down there for the moment. Let's actually think how we are going to fight the new Tau hotness. Now, it'd be very easy for me to relive the good old days of Mordian Glory and do a Tau rant video and all that kind of good stuff, all that salt. There's been a bit of salt on the Mordian Glory channel, and I know you guys love the salt, but the point is that we have to be able to play into these things. We have to at least go down swinging. We have to give the Tau, at the very least, a little pause for thought. We have to be like, they think they're the masters of all the firepower and shooting, and we just have to basically go, yo, we were here first, bitch. So, over our dead bodies, over our many dead bodies, let's be honest, but over our many dead bodies, you will have, we are the gatekeepers for the shooting death army, and they're going to have to bloody wrestle that from our cold, dead, pulse exploded hands. That's what they're going to have to do. Now, they look like they're in a good position to do it. I'm not going to lie, guys, they're not in a good position. If there's anything you could take from this initial rambling, incoherent intro, it's that Tau looks strong, and Tau are going to be on the competitive scene, and so therefore we're going to have to think about how we're going to beat them. So, let's get into it. Let's take a look at how we're going to beat these bloody blue fishy bastards. Now, it goes out saying that Tau are pretty good at shooting, but they also have access, with the way Crute are currently pointed and some other little bits and bobs that they have, that they're also pretty good at combat. Now, the thing is that in the past, and I'm talking quite distant past here, Guard basic infantry were still able to bully basic Tau infantry. And that was kind of how it was. If you could take enough men and you could charge enough dudes forward and you could get into combat with them, then you'll be having a great time. But those days are long gone, and that might be what happens in the lore, where like a platoon of Guard can sweep a ridge clear of Tau fire warriors if they make it. But that isn't what's really going to happen in this case. The Tau have access to Crute, which are 6 points. And yeah, that's pretty competitively priced when you consider a Guardsman is 5.5 points. But they're pretty good. They're pretty good melee for that, and they're pretty good chaff for that. So that's it's not a good old bayonet charge. I'm sorry, Mr. Commissar. I'm sorry. Please don't execute me. But a good old bayonet charge isn't just going to solve all our problems. I know, heresy. Please get the Inquisitor, get the Commissar down here. So they've got decent melee. They've also got the ability with battle suits to now fire into combat as well, so we can't really tie them up, and of course if you try and tie up things like Riptides and tie up things like Hammerheads and whatnot, they can shoot to combat. They have the big guns never tire rule. They can shoot into combat. So it's not just a simple case of, right, just beat them in combat, because I don't think that's going to work. Personally, this is my first impression. My first initial impression is that's not going to work. They do, of course, have very impressive shooting. And so we've all seen the new railguns, the new big railguns. We've also seen some chit and chat around the broadsides, and they also have, you know, they've got riptides as well, and they're just generally, you know, Tau do shooting, but Guard do shooting as well. And I think that we're gonna have to use our big guns. We're gonna have to use our big guns to be able to do something about these Tau. I think having tools in the toolbox is the way that we have to look at this. I don't think we can try and outshoot them. I don't think we can try and out combat them necessarily. I think we've got to try and have as many tools available in our toolbox so that we can have as many tricks up our sleeve as possible. Now, there is a couple of things that stand out about the Tau which are kind of in Guard favour. Okay, and again, this is initial impressions, guys. This could be very much wrong. I could be totally wrong about this. But the first thing that I would say is that they whilst they have bodyguard and whatnot, they don't have a huge amount of ignoring line of sight. They do have ignoring line of sight. Don't get me wrong. They've got various missile systems and whatnot that are great for ignoring line of sight. But it's not like the Guard, where we literally have, if you include Forge World, like 10 plus different artillery options that we can draw upon. So that's the first thing to mention. They're good. They can play the indirect game, but I still feel like 2 full payload Manticores is still the best indirect fire you can get. That's including Plague Burst Crawlers, in that, you know, including other options. I still think 2 full payload Manticores, if anything, I know they've gone up 10 points, but if anything, I think they're even more important now. They're just going to be useful for dinging those bodyguard units and for, you know, being able to fire back, be able to fire without the Tau just picking you up. So that's one thing. I think we've got access to indirect fire coming out the wazoo. We've got cheap mortar pits, those Kroot screens and those Kroot chaff that everyone's talking about. I think Guard are going to be will be okay into that, because either you've got the good old humble lasgun. I mean, as far as I'm aware, Kroot aren't getting anything better than a 5-up save. I mean, it's like a 6-up save traditionally, maybe a 5-up. But, you know, Kroot are going to be on, you know, they're still toughness 3. They're still on a crap save. You know, they're still going to die like little bitches to good old lasgun spam. So that's one thing to be aware of. We have the ability to clear chaff quite well. If it can be killed by lasguns, then it's not a good chaff against us. That's the first thing to mention. Second thing to mention, we've got mortars, which are great for indirect fire. And now that we're that pretty much everyone's going to be using Cadians, because they've gave much of his diddled bloody Guard soup with different multiple regiments and whatnot. Cadians again looking more favourable, but Cadian mortar pits will be great for clearing out those Kroot screening hordes that we're going to be seeing. If someone wants to run big blobs of Kroot, then you're going to be seeing max shots on those mortars, which is just fantastic. So that's another thing to take into account. And so the other thing that I want to mention is that whilst I believe we can win that indirect game, and you know, people may be laughing at me and typing things in the comments now because I may have totally missed something. If I have, please let me know. You know, if anyone's watching this video and you're not sure, always check the comments out, because they pick up a lot of stuff that I miss. But we've got full payload Manticores. We've got Basilisks. I know Basilisks aren't great, but even a single Basilisk, you've got the CP to sink into it to take advantage of aerial spotters every turn. It's not a bad choice. We've got Colossus. We've got heavy mortars. We've got Medusas. We've got options, especially taking into account Forge World, that are quite nice. Things that we can take advantage of. So we can definitely play that indirect fire game. The other thing is that Tau are very well pointed. I'm not going to deny that. You know, you're looking at like I think Long Strike is 165 points, whereas if you look at Pask, he's basically 100 points more than that with any semi-decent loadout. But one thing I would say is that people have made a huge thing about the new Tau ignoring ignoring invulnerable saves. They've got access to various modes of ignoring invulnerable saves. But Guard don't have a lot of invulnerable saves. We don't. We in fact, our main tanks don't have any invulnerable saves. So we're you know, whilst everyone's going on about these different, you know, abilities for Tau to ignore invulnerable saves, they don't really factor in to us. They're not, you know, it's stratagems which give them bonuses that just don't really play into it. So not having an invulnerable save is not an advantage at all. Don't get me wrong, but it's not a disadvantage against the Tau, because they were going to be getting you anyway. So that's something to mention. Now, the other thing that is important to mention is that Tau still are not great at going into Psykers. And Guard have a number of things that allow us to, well, get a few mortal wounds out there a turn. So firstly, we've got good old Smite. Secondly, we've got Psychic Maelstrom, which can be difficult to get off, but in the greater good, we have access to the stratagem that allows you to give +2 to cast on a Weird Vein Psyker unit and on a Primaire Psyker. So we've got a few ways of mortal wounds, and then don't forget, you know, with Grey Knights taking a bit of a, you know, nerf, Thousand Suns not being as prominent as expected. The last event I went to, I didn't face Grey Knights Thousand Suns once. You can start thinking about bringing back the Double Smite Inquisitor. Now, for those that don't know what the Double Smite Inquisitor is, it's a basic Inquisitor. It costs you 60 points. He maybe a CP here and there, but you upgrade him so he can cast Smite, and he can cast an Inquisition named Smite called Castigation, or as I like to nickname it, Castration, because I say I'm going to castrate you to my opponent, which does get me some funny looks, I'm not going to lie. So the point is if we add that up, we've got a Smite for the Inquisitor, we've got Castration, we've got Psychic Maelstrom. So those are three things. We do have Gaze the Emperor, but it's pretty close range, so I'm not just going to take that into account at the moment. But we've got three sources of mortal wounds there. But then if we go down the Psychic, the Weird Vein Primaire Psyker route, you're also looking at +2 to cast on those smites as well. So you'll have, you know, you'll be able to get 3 smites off if you do it in the right order. 3 smites off, but all of those smites will go off on a 5+. So that is, you know, on average, that's 5. I believe that's 5. You've got Smite, Inquisitor, Psychic Smite, Weird Vein Smite, and then you've got Castration, and you've got Psychic Maelstrom. That is 5 sources of mortal wounds that you can get off there. Don't forget, your Primaire Psyker can cast 2 powers with that stratagem again. So I think it's Psychic Choir is what it's called. So you can get that Psychic Maelstrom from the 5+ as well. So that's 5 sources of what is on average 2 mortal wounds a pop. So that's 10 mortal wounds. Now that's not even that expensive to pull off. That requires a 60-point Inquisitor, like a 30-point Psyker unit, and like a 50-point Primaire Psyker. That's all that takes for you to do that. That's all it takes. That's like 150 points, 200 points max, you know, if you're playing on the safe side, if you end up with a named Inquisitor or something or whatever. But, you know, we're looking at, you know, roughly 150 points, and that's quite nice. Now, yeah, if you go to an event and you're playing to Grey Knights, you've given up the ability to take up Hold the Witch. Fantastic. But, yeah, that's not fantastic. You know, that was sarcastic. Fantastic. Sarcastic /S. But the point is that is an option that we've got. Now, another thing to mention is that the Tau do have great firepower, and there was talk about people spamming, you know, 3 hammerheads and long strike and blah blah blah. But when you're actually looking at the competitive lists which are coming out, people seem to be taking the 1 hammerhead, and it seems to be long strike. That's where the competitive sort of lists seem to have settled. Now we'll have to see if it stays like that. But the point is that if it does stay like that, then that is very interesting for Guard, because as I mentioned in one of my previous videos, you know, Guard are going to be turning up to fights with 6 armoured vehicles. You're going to be running 3 tank commanders, Pask, and 2 full-pillared manticores. Now, yes, if you nip out to fire your Lehman Russ and you don't kill what you're going to kill, the Tau probably going to pick that Lehman Russ up. But we will typically be bringing 6 of these armoured tank units, and we'll be typically playing into 3 or 4. So there's a good chance you'll have 2-to-1 odds on your armour duels. You know, if you're taking into account things like, you know, Riptides count as 1, Longstrike counts as 1, and Broadsides or Storm Surge. You know, you're looking at like 2-to-1 sort of numbers for your units there. Now, another thing to mention is that with the falling away of Thousand Suns and of Grey Knights, and Genius of the Cult doing okay, but not, you know, not being everywhere in the meta. They're just the same players have started playing them again. The need for things like Sentinels is maybe not as high. They're still great, don't get me wrong, and they're still a tool to have in the toolbox. But if you're a player that didn't really want to take those Sentinels, then it's actually a relatively straight swap. You know, you drop your Sentinels, you add some psychic stuff into the list. You know, or another thing to take into account is you may not want to go Cadian. Okay, you may not want to. And if you don't go Cadian, then I think we need to all of us need to seriously be considering Talan. Because we may not be able to win that firefight with the Tau if we stay exposed. But what happens if we move, shoot, move? You know, you could very happily poke a Lehman Russ out, fire it, and then order that Lehman Russ to go back into cover with like the wind. Or get around behind them is what it's called, isn't it? For the tanks. So Talan have that option there. Now, of course, that's not great when you think about, well, there's no way to reroll random number of shots on the Tau, on the Talan, on the Talan battle cannons, stuff like that. Yes, that is true. There's going to have to be some play into that. Maybe this is very much a far-fetched idea, guys. Please don't rinse me in the comments for. But maybe something like Weapon X. You can't do Weapon X because you need your full payload manticles. Gadzooks. I was going to say maybe think about Weapon Expert on an autocannon, you know, an exterminator, but I don't think that would quite work, unfortunately. You might just have to console yourself with the fact that I'm going to move my Talan Demon Russ out. I'm just going to let the gods decide, the God Emperor decide what dice I get, and if it doesn't, if I get like a double 1 or I get like 4 shots on my battle cannon, I'm just going to move back in, and it's okay because I'll be safe and I'll get another chance next turn. You say to yourself, it's a long game, it's played turn 5. That's what I think we'll have to do. Now, of course, I'm just going to say, guys, I haven't played into the new tower yet. This is more of a theorycraft. Like I said at the beginning of the video, this is the first impressions. You know, my first impressions on the Orc faction was totally off. So I could be totally off on this one. Happy to be proven wrong. Happy for people who have had a chance to play into the new tower yet to say, look, Morning Glory, you need to take into account X, Y, Z. And if that's the case, I'll do a follow-up. I will do a follow-up. You guys know that if I'm wrong, I will address it and all that kind of good stuff. But that's where I'm thinking, where we are now. We have to leverage the fact that we have great chaff clearing ability. We have to leverage the fact that we still turn up to the battlefield with the most armoured vehicles, the most tanks. We have to take into account that we've got those psychic capabilities, you know, and I think those are the sort of 3 keys that we can lean on. So also things to mention is that, you know, Scions potentially are going to be looking very tasty, because if the Tau have these mechanisms by which they win, if anything's exposed, they die. Well, why not lean into the faction that is literally built around that, which is Scions? You know, if you drop a Scion unit in, that it's got to achieve its job and then it's going to die. You know that's what happens. That's how Scions function. So if you are going to be playing into an army that makes sure that happens against any opponent, then go for the Scions. That's my thinking here. I mean, you could have just raining down Scion units which are able to just keep the Tau on the back foot. I mean, Tau love to play the fire maneuver game. There's lots of chatter on the internet about their maneuverability, how they can get around you, Cold Star commanders, all this kind of stuff. But those Cold Star commanders are potentially going to be much less willing to just jet off and do X, Y, Z and blah, blah, blah if they know that they're going to get countered by drop drop special forces. That's definitely something to think about. You can try and play the Tau at their own game. Go for those special forces. Go for that concentration of firepower. So that's something that we're going to have to think about. So maybe the traditional guard can outgrind the Tau, but maybe it's time for me to go back to my Scions. I went Scions for 6 months. I've gone regular guard for 6 months. Maybe I try souping them, because I believe you can still soup Scions regular guard because they've got different regiment keywords, so that's allowed. Please let me know down in the comments if that's wrong. But maybe I just go down the Scions again and I'm just like, look, I'm going to hire my Scions, they're going to be really well protected, and I'm just going to constantly be getting the jump on these Tau bastards. And if they want to shoot a unit up against me, that's fine, but then I'm going to jump out, I'm going to plasma. That's what I'm thinking could definitely be the case. And Torx Primes with Dackers are fantastic for just sweeping the board clear of chaff. I have beaten Skitarii spam. Admittedly, it was by 1 point, but I've beaten veteran cohort Skitarii spam thanks to the chaff clearing abilities of the Torx Prime. That was I'll link that video at the end of this one. That's when I went to a grand tournament and I managed to beat Admech when they were at their height, which is my biggest life achievement to date. That is going on my tombstone. So there we go. So that's my thoughts. You've got your Scions, you've got your Psychics. Like I said, combat I don't think is a trap against Tau. We'll have to see. I think combat guard is a trap against Tau. I'm sure there'll be some faction which can pull it off. The other thing to sort of consider is that, and this is what some people have been saying, I don't know how this really applies to guard, but the other thing to consider is if you can get the drop on them early. If you can get the drop on them, then and you can mash them up, and you can guarantee killing them in one go of combat. If you can do that, then you've got a chance. So I don't know how. I mean, obviously that really more applies to things like Raven Guard and Ultramarines and Marines in general, who are much better at combat than us. I don't really know how that applies to us guard players, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind, something to take into account. So anyway, we'll leave it there, guys. Let me know your thoughts. Those are just my initial thoughts. Obviously, we're going to have to get in amongst them. We're going to have to play some games against them, and I will be doing specific follow-up videos. But those are my initial thoughts about Tau. It's not just about combat. It's not just about this. It's not about that. I think you're going to have to take into account the psychicness, the indirect fireness, the ability for guard to have more than them. Maybe we'll have to see how the Tau lists settle, but guard does have access to vast quantities of infantry, and maybe it is a case of, well, if the Tau are just going to one-shot everything, then we might as well let them one-shot an infantry squad over a tank. That would be my last closing thought. It might be if we see Tau are just too good at picking up things like Lehman Rusters, at picking up things like Manticores, then we might see a shift back to, look, I'm just going to take waves of infantry backed up by Scions, or I'm going to take waves of Scions and I'm just going to try and outgrind you. That might be how we play it, because they do drop off. Typically you're going to see them drop off turn 4 and 5 because they'll be picking, I think it's Montcar over the Carrion. So we'll see how that goes. But my last closing thought on this will be, maybe we have to outlast them, and maybe pure infantry is the route for that. But that feels like there's not enough tools in the toolbox for pure infantry. It feels like it's just too much of a skew. So we'll have to see. We'll have to play it by ear. Maybe pure infantry Scions. Who knows? We'll just have to get games in. Best thing we could all do, guys, is sort of take these initial thoughts of mine and combine them with the comment section, their thoughts, and take them into battle. And we just scratch off what works and what we put a tick next to what works, we put a line through what doesn't work, and then we do a follow-up video. Like, I get community feedback and all that good stuff, and I do my own battles into them, and we just get that right. This is what actually works against the new Tau. This is what doesn't work. This is what you need to do against them, and we condense that. That's what I will certainly be trying to do over the next 6 months. That's what I'll certainly try to do. And of course, then we'll have to look at the Perfidious Eldar, which will be coming out as well. But that is another video for another day. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it started off a bit wacky, but I tried to keep it fairly sensible by the end. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you like what you see here, as always, please consider heading on over to the Patreon page. There will be a link down in the description below. I don't do sponsors, adverts, monetization, or anything like that. I purely rely upon the generous donations of my Patreon supporters. And if you think I'm worth a few bucks, chuck me a few bucks. If you think I'm worth dog shit, well, don't chuck dog shit at me, but you just don't give me any Patreon money. And of course, I know I say it goes without saying every time, but I'm going to say it anyway. A huge thank you to current Patreon supporters. You guys are fantastic. You're legendary. It's thanks to the Patreon supporters that I'm able to get into tournament games, to get into Tau quickly. It's thanks to them that I'm able to explore new game systems like bolt action stuff. It's thanks to them that I'm able to keep my list and whatnot on the cutting edge of the guard meta. You know, air quotes, because you know guard don't really have a meta at the moment. But there we go. Like I said, massive thank you to the current Patreon supporters. You guys truly are legendary. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.